Japan is a ton of fun, and what better way to get back home than flying their flag carrier in business class? Today we fly across the Pacific on one of Japan Airlines' flagship routes from their hub in Tokyo, Haneda, to San Francisco on their 777-300 aircraft. After a bit of plane spotting from the parking garage across from Terminal 3, it's time to head inside and check this out. We'll look at the Japan Airlines ground product, including their 2 flagship business class lounges, and in-flight product, including the seats and dining, while also discussing the crazy lucrative US to Japan market in the brief history of the airline. So use those timestamps and chapters below to find what you came here for. Boiling it down, Haneda has 3 terminals. Terminal 1 is essentially Japan Airlines and its partners. Terminal 2 is All Nippon and its partners, and Terminal 3 is the main international terminal. So, us. There's rows and rows of check-in kiosks, so thankfully there's signs at the end with the carriers being found in that row. Japan Airlines, being one of the largest carriers here, has multiple rows, so we look for the one that's specifically for business class passengers. The line can get pretty long, but fortunately the self-serve kiosks are simple and take less than a minute to get things done, especially if you're carrying on your bag. The back departures hall is the outbound immigration and security, and they do have a priority lane, so as a business class passenger, we line up there, and with automated immigration it took only about 2 minutes to get through and into the terminal. Welcome to Haneda's Terminal 3. Opening in 2010, Terminal 3 has 20 jet bridges. Like Narita, there's some of the world's best airport restaurants here as well, as that's one of Japan's specialties. It also has lounges from each of the major alliances. There's All Nippon lounges for Star Alliance, Delta Sky Club for SkyTeam, and Japan Airlines and Cathay Pacific for oneworld. Just past Gate 114 is the bulk of the lounges, including ours for Japan Airlines, who actually has 2 lounges here. They've got the Sakura Lounge for business class passengers, and the SkyView Lounge also for business class passengers. The first level you'll reach is the Sakura Lounge, which is the main business class lounge for oneworld passengers. First thing you'll find in the door is a baggage storage area. Past that, though, it's mostly a giant open space with all sorts of seating options. Some areas are comfier with couch-like seats, tables on the side. These seats also have their own refreshment bar, with tea, coffee, soft drinks, and alcohol. Better for work are the seats adjacent to that, containing charging options and counters or tables in front of the chairs. The counters along the edge were great for convenience, but also because the views of the ramp and traffic rollout. Continuing along this wall is the more private areas of this lounge. Not entirely enclosed, but there is a great work table that at least has a partition between you and the main dining area. There's also a small enclave of seating for 2. Then we've backed ourselves into a corner, literally. This lounge is basically a horseshoe shape around the kitchen and dining. Here you can see the hallway on the right we just walked through, and now off to the left where the first thing is another countertop seating option. This continues on to the next dining area, but with even better ramp views than the runways. Here's the central dining area. This is the best space to eat, and also the best to hang out with a larger group of people, with the main buffet seen here in the background. A lot more dining tables. Honestly, from single travelers to groups, there's spaces for you, rest assured. This was definitely the busiest part of the lounge, but if you wanted to be a bit more social, this may be the place for you to hang out, especially in the more booth or couch-looking seats. That's not the only dining area, because wrapping around the back of the lounge is more dining tables. I feel like 90% of this lounge is just a place to eat. This area is definitely more secluded. Sure, it's still an open dining area, but not as many people wander back here. This area does have its own buffet, although it has much less options, so more snacky than mealy. Bread, fish, and eggs. In the back corner, over here, you'll find some bonus amenities. Other than the lavatories, we've got showers, cell phone booths, and sleeping and massage chairs in private cubicles. Back to the main buffet, however, because it's breakfast time, and I'd like a true breakfast. We follow the horseshoe back around the hallway, around that central area, and back into the crowded dining area, because if you do a 180, you'll find the main food options. Separated into a few sections, we've got all the breakfast fixins, Japanese and Western. One counter with things like eggs, potatoes, pancakes, croissants, and sausages. Another counter with miso, soup toppings, and seafood. Then the connected room to the right is the drinks. Similar to the refreshment corner, we've got soft drinks, coffees, and alcohol. All said and done, I've got a bit of everything to complete my breakfast before my last step, the shower. Like a hotel room, they give you a card that you tag on to the open door. It's a good-sized shower suite, complete with amenities and towels, and plenty of space to freshen up before your flight. That's all fine and dandy, but upstairs I wanted to check out the SkyView Lounge that we also had access to. The entrance is similar to the Sakura Lounge, but being that it's on a higher level, it's set up with even better views. Although I do find it a bit odd that they gave the highest level to a partner instead of keeping it for their own flagship lounge. I got in here about 15 minutes before closing, so I just had to do a quick lap to check it out, as it closes much earlier than the main lounge. The center of the lounge houses the main dining options up here. They were cleaning up, but from the looks of it, it doesn't have quite the assortment of the Sakura Lounge, but it's got enough to keep you snacking while you hang out for a short while. The seating in this lounge is much more uniform, as there's large counters but also pairs of seats located right next to the buffet, along with some counter seating along the window, just like in the other lounge. I do find the views to be better and less obstructed, allowing great views of arriving and departing aircraft, and some just parked at the gates out front. The counter just keeps going, but turns into individual tables along the walls along this boomerang-shaped lounge. I tell you that the amount of seating in this lounge is insane to me. It's just extra weird being here right before closing since it's so empty. This area down this side of the lounge is perfect for getting work done. Charging ports, desks, and even more private booths in the back. Then the last corner looks almost like another dining room, although there isn't any other buffet, so it's really just an empty sea of seats. Honestly, if it were staying open longer, this is where I'd want to hang out, as it's more private than being in the corner, but also has a better use of decor, especially in this private room. Pretty much the only enclosed space in all of the two lounges, it's a great looking space, and also has the only other person in this lounge at the moment, and its own refreshment bar, and definitely the best looking part of the lounge. Despite all the seating, this space does lack some of the amenities like private sleep booths and showers. It seems like your better option for a short-term stay, and the main Sakura Lounge being best for a longer layover. For those of you who haven't spent time in Tokyo, they've got two international airports, Narita and Haneda. This one, Haneda Airport, was Tokyo's main airport for a long time. That was until the demand and size of the city's aviation market was outgrowing its space, and much like inner-city airports, they ran out of space to grow in this location. So the Narita Airport was built to allow for greater expansion. Initially, Narita was meant to take most of the international flights for Tokyo, but honestly, they both see international and domestic flights at this point, even if Narita is much better positioned for growth. Once this Terminal 3 opened, Haneda's international capacity went up exponentially year by year. Haneda actually sees a lot more passengers each year, although Narita has a higher proportion of international passengers. Perhaps the biggest drawback is that both airports are major hubs for both Japan Airlines and All Nippon, giant intercontinental airlines, meaning that it's not uncommon for an itinerary to have a Tokyo connection arriving into one of the airports and departing from the other. Be aware of this when booking, but if you do have to make that transfer, there are buses and trains that connect the two airports. Neither is all that expensive, but it can take over an hour to make the journey, and you'll obviously have to pass through immigration and enter Japan, so just make sure to plan accordingly. Down at gate 114, it was nearly time for boarding, for Japan Airlines flight number 2 to San Francisco. They had the screen set up for groups 1 and 2 to queue for boarding. As a business class passenger, we get group 2 boarding, as first class gets group 1. Outside is our gorgeous 777-300 aircraft, a 17-year-old aircraft that's lived its whole life with Japan Airlines. One thing that always shocks me is the efficiency of the Japanese culture. We got this entire 777 boarded in about 20 minutes. The same aircraft is typically left 45 to 60 minutes to board in most North American and European countries. Down the stairs, we filed on board. One jet bridge is for first class only, and then everyone else uses the other one. Including a couple clips from my inbound flight, which had some fun lighting, I welcome you on board Japan Airlines 777 Business Class. This is the same Apex suite we've seen on Gulf Air and the previous Japan Airlines video, to name a couple. The 777, however, unlike the 787, has a 232 setup instead of 222, since the cabin diameter on the 777 is almost 2 feet wider, allowing for another seat without really stealing any space from each individual space. Sure, we all prefer the 121 setups that have become the standard, but if you are going to have a 222 or 232 setup, this is the way to do it, as the biggest perk is that every seat still has direct aisle access through this little hallway here, and the seats are offset, so your seatmate is still out of sight the whole flight. Perhaps the best part of the 777-300 is it has a super private mini cabin that you'll want to book if there's seats available at booking. This is because the 777s have a first-class cabin, seen here up front. Totally full for our flight, but honestly, after seeing pictures of their A350 first class, this looks like a bit of a letdown, a bit more ancient. Behind that, but still in front of the galley, there's space for one single row of seats. This is where we are located, which I totally lucked into as a seat in row 5 with last-minute booking just happened to be available. This allows for some extra privacy as there's no one walking by your seat at any time besides the crew. So, let's take a look around. Down the aisle to my seat, first off is the headrest without a headrest, just a leather flap with the logo on it. The seat itself is also hard like a rock and awfully narrow. There's armrests on either side that we can move indirectly as they lower and raise with the seat itself. There's also this little cutout here that honestly makes for a good makeshift cup holder, although I doubt that's what it's really for. The seat controls are in front of that, and I do like that everything is adjustable. There's a counter along the side of the suite that wraps all the way around, but you can also see the offset of the seats from here. I just find it kind of weird that the counter goes all the way around, because realistically, what am I putting here? There's also a great privacy partition to help with that as well, but has to be down for taxi, takeoff, and landing. On the wall is also the touchscreen seat remote, good since the TV itself is miles away. And hidden in the side counter is the tray table below a flap. It's a good sized table, about as big as it could be, and it does rotate so you can get out of the seat without putting it away. Below that is the charging and AV port, oddly enough. This is the only pathway to the seat, which is what makes these window seats extremely private actually. The TV is in front of you and has another counter just below it, the only problem being that it's out of reach, so it's honestly kind of for show more than anything else. Literature pockets to the side of that, and with a million things in it. And below that is the footrest. These Apex suites are great because they don't cram this under the seat in front of you, so it's plenty wide. Then there's storage below it, but they preferred our bag overhead, so this was really just best for shoes. These suites are long, meaning that we have 3 windows to ourselves, with a great view of that giant GE90 engine. And even though we got all this space overhead, they made the business decision to cover up the air vents. Amenity-wise, we got the water bottle, and I chose the sparkling wine as well. There was noise-canceling headphones that honestly got uncomfy just because of the pressure on the ears the entire time, instead of an over-ear cup like most carriers offer. They handed out hot towels on a little tray, and there was a pouch with slippers and shoehorn, but with the signature open-toe slippers found around East Asia. For the bedding, there was a pillow that's a great size, surface-wise, but it's about as thick as a piece of printer paper, so I had to fold it to really be useful. The blanket was nicer, large enough to cover you even if you're tossing and turning, and thick enough to keep you warm. The amenity kit bag was super fun and colorful design, and different on my 2 flights. Inside is a whole bunch of stuff. Normal stuff like the eye mask, dental kit, and earplugs, but the bonus of tissues and extra bonus of a charging cable that works for both Lightning and USB-C, and this phone stand. Never thought I'd see things like this in an amenity kit, but honestly, the best thing so far. The Japan-US market is one of the world's densest. Air travel, cargo, shipping, business, tourism, you name it. Looking at the aviation part of it, since that's all we're here for, there's currently 8 airlines that serve the US to Japan flights, including 4 US carriers, 3 Japanese carriers, and Singapore Airlines on a 5th Freedom route from Los Angeles. United currently has the most flights, serving Tokyo from all their hubs, with San Francisco, Los Angeles, Guam, and Newark seeing both Narita and Haneda. Plus United's San Francisco to Osaka flight, and then all the growth that's been happening with United out in the West Pacific. From Guam, they also serve Osaka, Fukuoka, and Nagoya. But also, Narita seems to be becoming some sort of United hub. Those of you who missed United's major route announcement on October 10th, they announced 3 routes from Tokyo that don't even involve the US, including Cebu, Philippines, Kaohsiung, Taiwan, and Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. All routes that will only see a United flight from Tokyo, as a sort of international hub, which we haven't quite seen in a while. Aside from United's Pan Am era, Delta also serves Japan, but has reduced service to only serve Haneda from all their hubs besides Boston, New York, and Salt Lake. American serves Haneda from Dallas, LA, and New York, and Narita from Dallas as well. Hawaiian is the other US carrier that sees Japanese flights from Honolulu to Osaka, Fukuoka, and both Tokyo airports. Both ANA and Japan Airlines serve the US from both Tokyo airports, with Narita seeing more than Haneda, but flying to US cities like Boston, Chicago, Dallas, Guam, Honolulu, Houston, Los Angeles, New York, San Diego, San Francisco, Seattle, and DC. So with each alliance spoken for, allowing for connections on both ends of the journey, it's no shock that Japan sees so many flights, with only the UK and China seeing more transoceanic carriers to the US. First thing I wanted to do after departure was raise the privacy partition. Once up, if you're in the window seat, it's about as private as a first class seat. Even people walking by can't see you. They have to physically walk through that little hallway. If you're on the aisle seat, it's a different story. First off, you're right on the aisle with a little privacy, but with this up, you also lose your window views completely, so definitely book a window. Super briefly checking out the entertainment system on the remote since the TV was far away. With the normal genres, I found the selection to be extremely limited. It does appear to be a bit bigger than it is just because some titles show up multiple times if they have multiple languages available. There's a few pages of content, but honestly I ended up running low on things to watch, so with multiple flights you'd have to get crafty or download your own content. The maps weren't interactive but instead cycled through a few available pages. For the Wi-Fi, they had a card in the literature pocket, and then after connecting and using the QR code, we get to the home page for packages of varying lengths with full flight coverage for $19. The main issue here being that it was slow, enough to load Instagram with a bit of patience at least, so go follow me at Patrick Flies Planes. And as we watched a beautiful sunset, we said sayonara to the Japanese coastline, and we were brought hot towels to prepare for dinner time. They handed out menus before departure with a bunch of pages, mostly because they had stuff in both Japanese and English. Starting with bios on the chefs that designed the menu, then the wines, champagne, sake, and shochu. This is followed by the spirits from the bar and the non-alcoholic options, including their special coffee, or so they claim. The dinner meal has the Japanese set or the Western set. You're seeing here the two cuisine options for dinner, one on each page. We do get more food, but I kinda like how they do that. The post-departure dinner is more formal, but from then on, it's a la carte. Basically, here are all the options, and then we can call them over at any time to order something else, which I did do after some sleep. The dinner service began with a tablecloth with signature red tab. Then was the drink and snack, which I couldn't find on the menu, but it was like a sun-dried tomato spread with breadsticks and a bowl of nuts. And to drink, I chose the JAL signature drink, which was a peach and grape mix. Then it was time for the starter, which had a box full of seasonal delicacies. Working around the box, the top left has grilled black cod with crab omelet, sweet potato, deep-fried scallop, sesame-dressed garland chrysanthemum, grilled maitake mushroom, and taro. Next to that is simmered abalone and grilled shiitake mushroom. Then is the wagyu, eggplant, mitsuba honewort, thickened soy sauce, and sangho pepper. That's next to the salmon roe and potato puree and yuzu citrus. And lastly is the steamed prawn with marinated chrysanthemum petals and ginger and dash gelée. Lots of interesting textures and very seafood based. I loved it, but it definitely isn't for everyone, especially those who are less familiar with Japanese cuisines that aren't sushi. I should also mention that this box came with a fun little crane to hold the chopsticks, and I chose the Asahi beer as they were out of the Sapporo. I was already satisfied, but that was just the starter. Then we got the main course. It included a stewed beef cheek with mustard spinach on the left, grilled salmon, deep-fried lotus root, and carrot-thickened dashi sauce on the right, with a curry in the middle. We also got a parcel of steamed rice, and a bowl of miso soup with seaweed and leeks, and a great plate of white radish, cucumber, and kelp. Great tasting food, and honestly, a bit from each section of the food pyramid. But to wrap up that food pyramid is the dessert. We got a Japanese traditional confection yokan, along with a cup of green tea. I was tempted to do the Western set, which sounded more my speed, but I'm glad I chose the Japanese cuisine. Much different from everything else I've gotten on a flight, but super tasty. With the sun having set, it was time to set up the bed for some rest on this trans-Pacific crossing. You can see the fully flat surface, and we've seen the privacy from the partition, but the only problem that I have with the seat is that it feels super long and narrow. In my Gulf Air video, I mentioned that it's like sleeping in a coffin, or at least it feels that way. Truth be told, I haven't gotten the measurements to compare the width with other business class beds, so it's kinda just by feel. Finishing the bed starts with that super thin pillow. At least with no headrest, it lays flat. Unfortunately, it's already pretty flat of a pillow. The comforter looks nice in this space, large enough for the whole space, and without air vents it's thin enough to not overheat. It's a very simple looking bed, I just find it to be a bit uncomfortable, just kinda hard and narrow. The benefit is that these seats don't wedge the feet underneath another seat, so there's ample space to sleep on your back, side, tossing and turning, it's really up to you. Being all tucked in, we had about 5 or 6 hours until I planned on ordering my breakfast, so I dozed off for the time being, and I'll see y'all soon. When I woke up, I looked through the menu to find my breakfast order. They told me that I should feel free to press the call button to order, but all my childhood anxieties were screaming at me to not push the button. While I debated what to do, I enjoyed the sunrise as we headed southeast, essentially parallel to the Northern California coast, until eventually I decided to use the lavatory and figured I could just place my order with them in the galley on my way there. First off, there's almost 2 galleys. One is for the meal prep and storage, the other one is a convenient pathway to get from one aisle to the other without disturbing the flight attendants at work in the main galley. And it does have what they call a sky gallery, or basically just a collection of photos from Japan. In this case, it's a springtime in Okinawa. After ordering my breakfast, I also went to use the lavatory to see what amenities were offered there. For starters, it's a bit bigger than the economy lavatories, but I find the colors make it feel much more dark, giving it a smaller feeling. The older 777 sinks are basic, but it was great to see amenities like lotion, dental kits, mouthwash, and this fun little paper crane in the corner. Not to mention, it wouldn't be a true Japanese carrier without a bidet in the lav as well. Shortly after getting back to my seat, they brought over my a la carte breakfast. I ordered a couple things. I went with their 2 main recommendations, the salmon and salmon roe rice bowl, and the JAL original noodle, which had their special tomato-flavored tantan noodles, Sora Noiro style. It is a bit smaller than the dinner, but technically I could have ordered whatever else I'd like as well. I found the quality of the food to be incredible. Super great not only to have Japanese carrier-based catering, but also from their main hub's catering. Between these two dishes and the coffee I got on the side, I was ready to start my workday right on landing. The only problem being that Tokyo to San Francisco is only about 9 hours. With meals, climbs, and descents, you typically only get a maximum of 6-ish hours of sleep unless you skip something. Japan Airlines is Japan's flag carrier, or the airline that's given preference to represent the country and government on a global scale. The airline was launched in 1951 with Japan needing reliable air transport to help growth after World War II, beginning as a domestic-only airline. Becoming publicly owned, they became Japan Airlines a couple years later after new acts allowed the formation of the state-owned airline. A year later, they were able to launch their first international service from Tokyo to San Francisco, with stops in Wake Island and Honolulu with 18 people on a DC-8, operating twice weekly and being given the flight number 1 and 2 for the out and back to show off its significance, a flight number it maintains to this day. They were able to drop Wake Island in '58 with the DC-7s, leaving it with the one stop in Honolulu, connecting Japan to its two largest diasporas in North America more efficiently. With these new long-haul flights, they also introduced their first two-class cabin that same year. It took them a while to grow internationally other than Hong Kong, continuing to Singapore and Bangkok, and that San Francisco service, but reached Seattle and Los Angeles by the end of the decade via Honolulu and Anchorage. Speaking of Anchorage, by connecting there in the 60s, they finally reached Europe, until the southern route with New Convair a few years later allowed them to conduct flights for the government on missions and tours. In 1968, Japan Airlines finally reached San Francisco nonstop with the DC-862, where they continued on to New York from there. San Francisco now had their own service on top of being part of the routes to Honolulu, Vancouver, New York, and a number of cargo routes as well. That same year, to wrap up the 60s, they reached Sydney, breaching into the southern hemisphere. By the 70s, most North American routes ran through Anchorage, and European routes through Moscow. This was also the decade where Narita Airport opened to try and take a bulk of the international flights, beginning in '78. The 80s then brought the majestic 747, allowing for 3-class cabins and a much greater range, expanding across continents, eventually allowing them to reach Paris and London non-stop before anyone else over Siberia overflight rights, being granted only to a few select carriers. This sparked their long-haul passion, and they grew the fleet in the 90s with newer 747s, 767s, and MD-11s. They also amped up their premium services. First class now saw sushi bars, sleeper chairs, sky massage seats, and their first 121 first class, inaugurating on the New York 747 flights, which was followed by the 777-300s being delivered with a new 232 lie-flat business class, marking their first major push towards one of the world's top major carriers. With their brand on a whole new stage, they joined the One World Alliance in 2007 and signed a joint venture with American Airlines a few years later, and then another with British Airways and Finnair shortly after that. With the new premium economy, they had installed a 4-class cabin with a newly imagined first-class suite, the same one seen on this aircraft. The modernization continued with the 787 delivery in 2012, used to launch the Boston service, and San Diego shortly after from Narita. These aircraft had the new Sky Suite business class, the same one on this flight as well, which won the Skytrax Award for Best Business Class in 2013. 5 years later, they received their first 5-star rating, and they continue to hold it to this day. All that just in time for the engines to spool up and take us around for a second attempt on this approach. San Francisco has this funky setup with the parallel runways that are closer than usual. The proximity of these runways makes it so that they have to meet specific spacing requirements, with aircraft largely needing to maintain visual separation when able. On a day like today, with an IFR ceiling over the airport, it's largely timing, managed by air traffic control. Looking here at the flight radar aircraft, this United SkyWest Embraer was just a bit close to us, and we were the aircraft in the position to go missed in this case. No matter, because 17 minutes later we were on the ground after another attempt at the ILS. Go-arounds are a fairly common occurrence in aviation and can happen for hundreds of reasons. It isn't necessarily pilot error, as is often assumed by passengers, but also due to weather like late gusts, wind shear, low ceilings, or anything else of the sorts. It could be because of an aircraft issue, or it could come from ATC. For us, it's a bummer because it tacks on 15 to 30 minutes more, making it tough for tight connections. Not that we can blame it on anyone for a go-around, but if it gives you some peace of mind, it also costs the airline thousands of dollars. So they aren't any happier about it, just a fact of aviation sometimes. Well, at this point, I've now flown Japan Airlines Flight number 1 from San Francisco to Tokyo Haneda, which I covered last year, but also now covered Japan Airlines Flight number 2 from Tokyo Haneda to San Francisco. It's also kind of fun because we've done it now on the 787 and 777, and even though they have the same seat design, the 777's cabin has a larger diameter. As for Japan Airlines, I'll start my review with the ground aspect. Check-in isn't anything special, lacking enclosed or decorated areas for business class, but most carriers lack that as well. Their lounges I found to be excellent. With the main lounge and the SkyView Lounge, there's ample space. I just wish the SkyView Lounge was open for longer because I found that to be a much nicer space, albeit lacking a couple amenities. On board, we've talked about the awards and praise the Sky Suite business class received once installed in 2012 with the first 787s. We've also seen it with other carriers now, like Gulf Air for example. The biggest thing for me with this, and that first class in front of us on this flight, is that it seems like since they installed it, got a couple great remarks and then just kind of stopped innovating the hard product from there, leaving the cabin to seem a bit old at the point. With the A350s having a whole new design, I'm just here hoping that the innovation reaches their other aircraft as well. That being said, as far as 222 setups or 232 setups go for that matter, the Apex Suite seen here is about as good as it gets, so it's kind of like the best of the worst. If you can nab a window seat, it's honestly more private than most closed-door suites even, and if you can get row 5 in the 777 in this mini cabin, it's even more private. Soft product, however, is their strength. I just can't get over how incredible the hospitality is on airlines from this region. As a fan of Japanese culture, I love the cuisine on board. And it looks freshly prepared and not reheated in a microwave or slop in a bowl. As far as the cost, this is one of the easier business classes to book. I booked it starting in Bangkok, so it was just about $2,000, which is far cheaper than only booking this segment on its own. Using American AAdvantage miles, however, this cabin is widely available to pretty much any Asian route. I know from looking at routes from my home in San Francisco to basically any Japan Airlines destination that I will see it as an option when booking through American Airlines at least. The only thing that remains elusive is that A350 first class. Those seats look incredible, but the mileage redemption seems to have a vendetta against me. And I definitely won't be paying cash, so hopefully I'll get lucky and find something sooner than later. Let me know your thoughts on Japan Airlines business class for now though, and until next Sunday, safe travels. I'll see y'all next time.